Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. I truly believe we are living in the age of incompetence. And the reason why I believe we are living in the age of incompetence is because no matter how many failures some individuals here have in America, they are allowed to remain on the job, even though it is clear to everyone that that individual is unfit to perform the duties of that job. Now, when I say that we're living in the age of incompetence, it's because I think about the 1980s when an individual, if they went out here and messed up, that individual would be out of a job as soon as possible. And I remember seeing a lot of TV shows coming up during the 80s, and if that show could not perform well in the ratings, what they would do is cancel that show right in the middle of a season, and in some cases they may even have episodes that they never even aired, but if the show did not meet the numbers that it was supposed to meet in the ratings, that show was quickly canceled. Now, back in the 80s, the reason why they would fire incompetent individuals almost immediately was because they wanted to mitigate their losses as related to this person messing up on the job. So in the 80s, what they would do, because they wanted to be able to try to salvage whatever they could, they would say, okay, this individual isn't working out, and because this individual isn't working out, what they would do is say, I'm going to terminate this individual, or I'm going to cancel this show, or I'm going to cancel this comic book because it's not generating enough sales, or this person is not performing up to standard, and I'm going to cut my losses and just move on. But today, in today's age of incompetence, an incompetent person is allowed to remain on the job or in political office no matter how many failures they have had, and this individual is allowed to continue failing without any semblance of accountability. That is a major difference between today and the 1980s. A lot of times there was a measure of accountability, and because there was a measure of accountability and there were standards for a person's responsibilities, a person had to go out here and meet certain benchmarks in order to remain employed or in political office. However, today, it seems like there are no standards and no barometer or measure for competence, and incompetent individuals are allowed to remain in jobs and positions of power, and they are allowed to remain there despite their numerous failures. For example, I can look at your Dan Didio, who ran DC Comics from 2002 to 2000, I say about 21 or so, and your Dan Didio basically was extremely incompetent, but sadly Warner Brothers did not terminate this man after DC Comics sales first plummeted due to many of his bad ideas, like the killing of Donna Troy in Graduation Day, the sexual violation of Sue Dibney in Identity Crisis, and the complete twisting of the ethics of DC's heroes, or his continued failures, which basically led to the complete collapse in sales at DC Comics, which led to the rebooted New 52. This man was clearly incompetent from day one, but he was allowed to continue failing in spite of a horrible track record, when if he were around in the 1980s and started to fail, he would have been terminated almost immediately so that the company could go out here and regroup and bounce back. But what I believe the reason for incompetent people like Dan Didio staying on the job for extended periods of time is the fact that we've had cronyism and nepotism encroach in places like corporate America and politics. And because people who are participating in nepotism and cronyism only want to keep their friends on the job. What they do is measure people based on how they feel about them, not go out here and measure them based on meritus criteria, such as a person's sales record, a person's track record, or a person's ability to meet goals. The person is not measured by these standards, it's just measured on how a person feels about someone. And because they feel a certain way about that individual is allowed to stay on the job. And that really segues into my next example of another member of the Age of Incompetence, your Joe Quesada. Now, your Joe Quesada was made editor-in-chief at Marvel Comics back in, I think, about 2002 or 2003 or so. And he basically oversaw the complete decline of Marvel Comics. And he really did, like Didio, had no publishing experience at all. And your Quesada really didn't have much of a vision or direction he wanted to take Marvel Comics. But because he was a friend of people in the business, and after Marvel got acquired by Disney, he was allowed to stay at Marvel Comics and collect a salary for an extended period of time. Now, he wasn't a competent individual, and he clearly had no real skills as related to building the business or moving the business forward, but he was allowed to stay because he was friends with another executive, and that's not really a good standard to have when you're running anything, because if you have a standard where people who are incompetent are allowed to stay on the job, what that does is make incompetence the standard for your business. And when you have incompetent people in charge, what they do is they hire people based on how they feel, not based on their skills, and they hire people not based on their ability to go out here and produce results. No, they just measure people based on how they're feeling at the moment. They just say, oh, this is my friend, this is my homie. And instead of the business being a business or an political office or anything running smooth like a business, it's run like a fiefdom. And when it's run like a fiefdom, nobody has to take responsibility for anything. Because in fiefdoms, what happens is that you have a group of people there based on nepotism and cronyism, but you don't have any measure for standards. And when you have no measure for standards, that means everything is going to fall apart, because nobody is taking responsibility for anything. And because nobody is taking responsibility for anything, nothing is going anywhere. And this is what happened with your Marvel and DC Comics. They went out here and they were run by people who were in their feelings about people and comfortable and wanted to be comfortable, and nothing grew. Because incompetent people, everything is about their feelings, and it is not about your ability to go out here and produce results. So when you're dealing with incompetent people, they don't want to go out here and be measured by any standard, and they don't want to be measured by any standard because they don't want any sort of account of their actions. And this is sadly the culture that is permeating through corporate America. It is the culture that is permeating through most American jobs, and sadly it is part of our political process. And when you have people who are incompetent in charge, what's going to happen is your entire nation is going to decline. And it's going to decline because when incompetent people are in charge, they don't really think critically about anything, and they don't have a long-term view of anything. It's all about their feelings. It's all about doing what they feel is right without ever critically thinking or analyzing their actions. And that's what makes them incompetent. And again, a lot of these people, they have no training in anything. They have no skills in anything. They have basically been placed in a job because somebody likes them and somebody had feelings about them. And those concepts are good for dating, but they're not good for a workplace. When you have people in a workplace or you have people in a place like political arenas, you need individuals who are qualified to do their jobs. And we saw an example of that during Hurricane Katrina, when we found out that, I believe his name was Michael Brown, who was the head of FEMA, had no sort of qualifications whatsoever to run the Federal Emergency Management Association, and that led to the deaths and suffering of people in New Orleans. That was all because a grossly unqualified individual was placed in an office based on how somebody felt about them, not about what they could do. And again, when you have people who are unfit for a job and they are in a position of power, they really don't understand the consequences of their actions. They don't understand the impact that their behavior has on others. And worse, when they're put in leadership positions, the only place they're going to lead you is straight to hell, because these individuals, they don't know what direction to go in, and any direction that they're going in just shows how lost they are. So when you're dealing with an individual who is incompetent, and you put them in places like management, or you put them in places that they like a political office like the presidency or being a mayor, they basically can run something straight into the ground, because everything is about their feelings. And you need somebody in those type of positions who is a critical thinker. You need somebody in those places who can go out here and problem solve. You need somebody who can come from a place of using logic and reason. And most importantly, you need an individual who can go out here and be objective and see the bigger picture, not just see their part in it, or an opportunity to get themselves in a picture in order to go out here and clout chase and try to get attention for themselves. And you need people who are competent in positions if you hope to build a nation, or if you hope to move a nation forward, or if you hope to move a business forward. And that's what many people in the 80s understood, that if you go to a job, you need to be competent at that job in order to keep that job. And if you're on a job, you're supposed to perform work up to a standard. And sadly, because we live in the age of incompetence, there is no measure for standards. And because there is no measure for standards, what's happening is that everything in America is falling apart. In most of our companies, we have people pushing social justice narratives in companies like Marvel and DC Comics. We also have them pushing them in politics in places all across the country. And many of these individuals, they're running on feelings and not critically thinking. And that just shows us how incompetent our leadership is, because a competent leader, when they see somebody failing, when they see something going wrong, they pull the plug almost immediately to mitigate their losses and to mitigate the damage that this individual will do to others. That's what any good leader does. Like the late Brandon Tartikoff, when he was running NBC, when he saw a show wasn't performing, he would immediately pull the plug on that show if it came on in the fall season. If it wasn't performing up to ratings, he would pull the plug on that show, even though they had episodes in the can, because he didn't want to wind up losing against CBS or CBS or ABC, as related to gaining ground in taking away from his number one spot. So what he would do is pull the plug on that show and then put another show in its place that could possibly perform better. Again, this is mitigating your losses so that you don't have to wind up taking a big loss. But these days, because of nepotism and cronyism, what happens is these individuals get chance after chance to fail. And what's really sad is, like in the comic book industry, you have bad writers like Mariko Tamaki and Vita Ayala, who continue to get jobs even though they show that their sales numbers are terrible. And yet these individuals continue to get rewarded after failure. And what's even worse is some people get promoted after failing. I have never seen anything like this in my lifetime, but this is what happens during an age of incompetence. Incompetent people are rewarded for failure. I have never seen anything like this in my life, but this is the first time I'm seeing it. And again, it just shows me what happens when you have no leadership. When you get incompetent people in charge, what they do is they don't know how to lead, they don't know how to set a direction. They're there because they were hooked up, and because they're hooked up, they fuck up everything, and people don't hold them accountable because they're their friends. And again, this is why major corporations like Warner Brothers and Disney are struggling right now, because they hire incompetent people, and the incompetent people go out here and make a mess of these companies. And they also are now in our politics and creeping into offices like the President of the United States and many other local regional offices all across the country. Again, incompetent people, they make hard times for people because the only reason why they're there is because they're the friend of a friend. And again, a friend of a friend is not merit. You want somebody who knows how to do their job, not somebody given a job because a executive wants to make sure this guy gets paid. No, you need a competent person who is qualified to do their work, and that's what you need in these businesses out here, because you wouldn't want to go to a doctor who was the friend of a friend and he knows nothing about medicine. So America really needs to really think about the standards that it has, because an age of incompetence could lead to the complete collapse of America. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct Imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Blast from the Past. Hell's aspiring angel takes on her demonic doppelganger in this action-packed, time-traveling E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Blast from the Past with a bonus E-Steam comic book, No Good Deed, in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.